What is a weed? A weed is any unwanted plant growing where you do not want it to grow. Weeds can be annuals, perennials, or biennials. Further, plants in these categories can be identified into winter, summer, or both winter and summer categories. What is the importance of weed control? Weed control can make the difference between a successful food plot and a failure. You can do everything right as far as planting your seeds at the proper depth, getting adequate moisture, planting at the appropriate times. If you have not addressed the weed issue, your time and money may have been wasted, as weeds can take control over your food plots. The first step in weed control is identification of your weed or weeds. There are two major groups of weeds commonly discussed, and they are grasses and broadleaves. There are other lesser discussed groups such as sedges. All the plants in each group share common characteristics. Some characteristics can even be shared between groups, which can lead to the misidentification of certain weeds. For instance, sedges are commonly misidentified as grasses. Different measures are commonly needed to control weeds in different groups. You will never eradicate all weeds. This is a fact we must live with, and therefore develop a means of controlling the weeds so they will not interfere with our food plots. The term weed control may be misleading and should be addressed as weed management. You can still have some weeds, but the number of plants will be drastically lowered or hopefully non-existent. Knowing when to mow, till, or spray for maximum benefit will aid in the proper management of your weeds. You only have three means of controlling weeds, and they are mechanical, chemical, and cultural. Mechanical is the use of some type of tool to physically remove or set back the weed. This can be disking, mowing, or even hand pulling. Next, we have chemical. Everyone knows herbicides are chemicals, so this method is self-explanatory. Cultural can be anything from planting certain plants which inhibit the growth of other plants to having a layer of dead plant material covering the ground. Using multiple methods to control weeds is your best route to success. For instance, if we disc, then after new weeds begin growing, apply a herbicide, you will have taken out more weeds than disking alone. Another example of multiple methods is using Roundup Ready plants and apply 2 or more applications spread out over time of a specific herbicide. Additionally, you can apply a pre-emergent herbicide with residual control prior to planting. A residual control herbicide lasts longer than a contact herbicide as it stays active within the soil, where a contact herbicide only has effect on plants it is applied to. Do not confuse contact and residual herbicides when applied to resistant plants, as there is either no soil activity or very short-lived soil activity with a contact herbicide. Residual herbicides will remain active within the soil for weeks, months, or years. Some common contact herbicides are Silithium, a grass-specific herbicide, 2,4-DB, which is a broadleaf-specific herbicide, or glyphosate, which is a non-selective herbicide. There are many herbicides which contain these chemicals sold under other names. Make sure what you are purchasing is the correct herbicide for your specific application. Match the correct herbicide to the weed or weeds you are targeting, as well as application at the correct time. Herbicides are most effective on plants less than 12 inches in height. Now, let's look at some different food plots and see the effectiveness of weed management using multiple methods of control. This is a mix planted after the area was disked. At the time the plot was planted, there was already some weed emergence. After planting, but before germination of the planted seeds, the area was sprayed with a non-selective herbicide. As you can see, we have an effective weed control which will allow the planted mixture to outcompete the later appearing weeds. The ground is still fairly clean of weeds at this point. This area was no-tilled into a heavy grassy weed. Prior to drilling, the area was mowed, allowing the grass weeds to begin growing again. After drilling, but before seed germination, the plot was sprayed with a non-selective herbicide. The dead duff you can see on top of the ground will help limit further weed germination as well as hold moisture during dry times. Many food plotters plant mixes which can restrict the use of post-application of herbicide. In these instances, you have to have weeds controlled at planting time because the application of a grass or broadleaf specific herbicide will kill part of what you have planted. This is a soybean food plot. The area on the left of the screen was not planted but still had herbicide applied at the same rate and times as the soybeans. As you can see, the non-planted side already has weeds beginning to grow, while the area which was under the canopy of the soybeans remains weed-free. The canopy allowed weed suppression, as can be seen in this area. Again, this is still in the soybean food plot. There on the left side of the screen did not get sprayed when the rest of the plot was sprayed for whatever reason. As can be seen, the grass was able to take over and outcompete the soybeans. This shows just how important weed control is later in the season and how your weed management efforts affect your food plot crop. In this area is a planting of oats. The area has been in a food plot for several years, and the weed management method used was just tillage. As you can see, there are weeds growing, but the weeds are not numerous enough to affect the plot in a negative way. This is another area planted in oats. This area is a new food plot and had only tillage performed. As you can see, there are weeds, including grasses and broadleaf, that are already starting to take over the oats. This area shows a failure to properly manage weeds.